Stefan Verstappen, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me back on, Russell. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's great to meet Clayton.
Yeah, Clayton's nice also here. Clayton's the producer of the program. Clayton, say hello to the audience.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Stefan. Nice to see everybody. I'm very excited to meet you and very excited for the show.
Stefan Verstappen has written 7 books, many of them on martial arts, many of them on urban survival techniques. Visit chinastrategies.com or visit his YouTube channel, Stefan Verstappen. Stefan, off the top, we wanted to talk about some survival myths today. And you can start anywhere. What's one of the biggest survival myths that you know of? And then I've got some questions for you.
Well, I think that for me, the biggest survival myth is bugging out. I think there's a time and place for it, but it's really rare that you're going to want to bug out. And a lot of the YouTube videos and what you read on the blogs is, as soon as something bad happens, everybody's going to get their bug out bag and go and run and live in the woods, which is, everybody loves camping, and a lot of people that can go camping. It's a good time. You go for a week. You bring everything you need with you, and it's wonderful. I always encourage people to go camping, but camping is not living in the woods, and especially for us Canadians, with Clayton there in Alberta and me here in Toronto. I mean, there's 6 months of the year where you do not want to be out in the woods overnight, because you're going to freeze your butt off. And so the idea that people have got all these weird, all the survival gear is kind of funny too. There's so many tools and tricks and techniques and all that kind of stuff too. And it all seems to be aimed at, like roughing it in the woods, like, well, you're going to need to be trapping your food and all that. I mean, oh my God, it's delusional. There are very few people that could really live out in the woods. It's a rare breed of man that does that, and a few females. And it's very harsh. And unless you've done a lot of it, you are not going to like it. And not only you're not going to like it, you're not going to survive it. So where would you bug out? When would you bug out? It would have to be a really specific situation where you get advanced warning that your city is about to be bombed or invaded, or there is a poisonous gas leak and the cloud of toxic gas is going to hit your neighborhood in 30 minutes, or the city's on fire or something like that, where you really have to leave because you will die if you stay. Then if you need to bug out and go to the countryside and hold out there for 3 or 4 days until the danger passes, okay, fine. That's when a bug out kit comes in handy. You don't need all these off-grid survival tools because, you really don't want to be out there that long. If you're out there for 3 days, maybe a week at the most, until things calm down, and then you can come back towards civilization or rescue center or whatever they're setting up. Fine. But if you think that, we're all going to bug out and live in the woods and hunt deer, and, it just, like I said, there are people that can do it, but for the vast majority of people, they're not going to survive. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, I've studied this, and I've got all the woodsman skills and all that, but I'm not sure I could last a winter. I really not. I'd probably cap myself first because, being in the woods in the dead of winter in Canada, holy shit, with nothing but, the odd porcupine to look at. It's a horror. You're going to want to shoot yourself before you want to survive. But so bugging out, and even when I lived in California, it was really ridiculous, the idea of bugging out, because I lived in Southern California in Ventura. And I mountain biked all through the mountains there. I love it. It's beautiful. You got to take your water with you because there's no water up there. So anybody in LA or San Diego or Santa Barbara, if they're going to bug out, there's only one way to go, and that is up into the Sierra Madre Mountains or the Sierra Nevadas. And all the way from the coast to the top of those mountains, there is not a drop of water. There's nothing to eat up there. Maybe you might see a deer, but the only thing you're going to eat is tarantulas and rattlesnakes. So anybody bugging out in that part of the world, you're not going to make it because you cannot carry enough water to survive. We need like minimum 4 liters a day, right? And so you're talking 18 pounds of water a day. So if you want to survive for 3 days in the desert, you're looking at carrying 60 pounds of water minimum. In the desert, you would really need to carry more. But so 60 pounds, you know, in your backpack, that's not including survival equipment or anything like that. So if you're thinking that you can, or those people in California that were going to bug out into the hills, well, you know, maybe for a day, but for more than 3 days, well, you're going to carry a 120-pound pack. It's not going to happen. So bugging out is, you know, there's so many videos about bugging out, but, and I call it an emergency evacuation kit, you know, that it should be something you could take to a motel too, right? And have stuff in it that would
I think there's this idea that when the shit hits the fan, it's every man for himself. And being the lone wolf, that's the worst thing you can do in this situation.
Well, that's the other thing I kind of disagree with too. I'm on two minds. It depends on the situation, right? Like you're going to have to, whatever happens, you're going to have to adapt to whatever peculiar situation. Now, shit hits the fan. What does that mean? You know, like zombie apocalypse, you know, extinction level events. It's hard to say. I mean, it can go from one extreme to another. Most of in those extreme situations, yeah, nobody's going to survive. No, you know, you're all going to die. But in other situations, like what kind of scenario would it take for me to want to really bug out into the woods? Martial law? No, I'm not going to bug out in the woods because of martial law. You know, house to house searches.
You live in Toronto. Right? Huh? You live in Toronto. You live in Toronto.
Well, Oakville, which is outside of Toronto.
Yeah, for the people that don't know, it's the Toronto area, Oakville. It's a lot different there than it is here in Alberta. We can commute to our farm, which is 40 minutes away, and do all the time on the weekends. We've got things set up. We've got trailers and RVs and stuff like that, and places where we can shoot and quad and have barbecues and fires, and we do it all the time. We have a well there. We have beef cattle there. We have gardens there. In Toronto, you don't have a lot of backup for yourself. I've seen times myself where it's the day after Christmas, and that one day in between, the trucks don't come to the store. So that one day of the trucks not coming, you can see the barren shelves that are a result from that one day where they can't come, and how close you are to being without the food and water and everything that's provided there for you all the time.
Yeah,
that you kind of maybe take for granted. Or the Toronto ice storms, for instance. I don't know if you were there during that, where it was tough to get water.
I was in California.
And it shows how quick it happened. So for us, it's not a matter of bugging out and taking off and living out the thing. It's just having set up means beyond what we have here, grocery store, everything at the convenience. We love that. We have the condo in the city and everything's great here. And we love to keep it that way. But we also have set up food and our own kind of systems off grid as well to take care of and to provide for ourselves as well. In Toronto, you don't have that option. So if you don't have that option and that doesn't happen and you don't want to bug out, what do you do?
Well, you see, again, it depends on the situation, but for your circumstance and your environment, I mean, yeah, that's great. You know, you got a lot of property around there. I know I have friends that are in Alberta too that are, you know, pretty hardcore preppers, and yeah, they got property, they got farm animals, they got stored food and water and chicken coops and trout streams, and you know, they got duck and geese. I mean, of course, that's not, that type of situation is the vast minority of people. Most people are going to be like in the suburbs or in the city. And for surviving in the city, I'm a little bit different. I have a different approach. I'm very strategic and very, I don't know, a little bit more ruthless. You have to know how to blend in the city and take advantage of what the city has to offer. So even though you're in a good situation, and this is another one of the myths I want to talk about, is that, you know, if you get yourself a farmhouse and a big property and you're way out in the back of the sticks and all that, that you'll be safe. But not necessarily, because we've seen from history, are you familiar with the Holodomor famine in Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia in the 1930s and 40s. That's when the communists took over Russia, the Bolsheviks. They starved to death.
40 million people died, 40 to 80 million.
That's right, 40 to 80 million people were starved to death, and these were in Yugoslavia. Not, I'm pretty sure, yeah, Yugoslavia. And most of these people were farmers. Now, what they did was they sent troops to every farm, and and it doesn't take that much. You think that, you know, you're way out in the country and it's, you know, 100 miles up the dirt road to get to your farm, they're going to leave you alone. That's not necessarily true, because way back in the 1920s and 30s, long before satellite communication and cell phones and satellites and surveillance and drone surveillance and, you know, infrared, they had no problem raiding every farmhouse and robbing them blind. And then just in case, you know, they thought you might have, you know, stocked some food in the basement, or, you know, dug a hole out in the woods and buried some of the food, they would take your wife and children and gang rape them in front of you until you revealed where you had any food hidden, right? And so you take you know, 1,200 troops, and they each hit, you know, 10 farmhouses a day, you know, in teams of 5, right? And you only need 5 armed men to pull up to your farmhouse and see that you're there and ask what you've got. Now, I know you're well armed and protected. You've got people that can help you, but even if you take out those 5 guys, well, you know, next time it's going to be 500 guys that show up, because, you know, they will have failed to, you know, contact headquarters, and they'll backtrack it, you know, because they have to do a radio check every time they hit a farmhouse. And if they, you know, they know the schedule of what farmhouses they're supposed to hit. So even if you take these guys out, there'll be more there. So,
of course,
the idea that getting a nice farm way out in the country, growing your own food and stockpiling and all, that will make you safe. It will make you safe if it's a zombie apocalypse. But if it's like, you know, World War III Bolshevik revolution, crackdown on everybody that doesn't agree with the liberals, no, they will find you, and they will steal your stuff. And if they can't find your stuff, they will torture you. That's what they did to these people.
You get it. There's always the military. There's always the bigger force, and that's not really why we're set up. The whole gray area in between, like what happens in 4 days when the grocery store, the trucks aren't going to the grocery store. So 4 days.
Oh, well, then you're well set. You're well set.
That's what it's about. Is just about, or you get forced out of your homes from Fort McMurray. So you grab your inch bag, which I'm never coming home bag, which has your worst case scenario, has the things you need to be able to last 4 or 5 days. That stuff prepared. That's the kind of stuff that I think people should be more a part of. I did mountain rescue for the Golden District Search and Rescue Club and the Department of National Defense and the Provincial Emergency Program. And they showed you that you should have at least a 24-hour bag in your car at all times. You should have a 3-day or 4-day pack. And they're saying about 10 weeks worth of food and water is what the government says, or somewhere between 4, you read, and 10 weeks worth of food and water before any help arrives. And you look at things like Katrina and some of the big things, help didn't arrive as quick as they wanted to and didn't arrive for everybody. So it's taking these simple things, is that whole gray area in between before where you have no other choice. You have to give in or you know, and being able to provide stuff on your own without the support of the state constantly. If that goes away in 3 days, then what? That's the kind of stuff that's important to me in my life lately.
No, exactly. See, for me, what I think is the greatest danger is the scenario of this tyrannical government taking over. You know, that to me is the most imminent type of danger. We've seen this before. You know, what we're seeing now with the liberal craziness and the SJWs, and they're tearing down statues, and anybody that's not a liberal, they get doxxed and fired from their job, and their Patreon accounts are suspended and all that. I've seen all this before. I've not personally, but I've read history, and this is the early stages of a communist takeover. That's what they did in China during the Cultural Revolution. It was exactly the same thing. It was, feminism was a big thing, and then it was, we have to fight the 4 olds, and nobody ever knew what the 4 olds were, but what they did was they went, they burned down all the temples, they tore down all the statues. You know, they destroyed their history and their culture. And when I was in China in 1985, I was really looking forward to finally, because they finally just opened up the doors, a couple of years earlier. So I was one of the early tourists that were allowed to roam on your own, right? And I went to see all these historical sites, and there was nothing left. It was all ruins. The SJWs had destroyed it all in the 60s. You go there today, you'll see temples everywhere, but everything that you see today was rebuilt in the last 20 years. It's basically just a tourist attraction now, like the old West town, right? It wasn't really an old West town. They just built a town there to look like the old West. And so China today has all these wonderful old temples and historical buildings, except most of them, 90% of them were just rebuilt in the last 10 years because the communists destroyed everything. So when I see what's going on today with this liberalism and Justin Trudeau there, Zoolander, and what he's been doing, how many times does he have to award some refugee $10 million now? I count $40 million, Anyways, he's doing his best to destroy Canada. But once these guys get in power, the socialists turn into communists, and the communists will do what I said. They will target people like you and me. We're on their shit list, and they will come after us. That's what they always do. And in that case, listen, if given a choice, would I rather be here or in your situation? No, I'd rather be in your situation. It is the best possible. It's the most you can do. I mean, other than having, converting some underground missile silo, like it's really, you're in the best position. And ideally, you are able to survive most of anything that's going to happen. But what I meant about the, the bug out scenario is that it just seems to be that a lot of people think that's what they're going to do for anything that happens that goes wrong, like a blackout or, it's a good tool to have, the bug out bag. I recommend it, absolutely. In my upcoming book, I recommend, like, there's 4 levels of preparedness, and it's just an extrapolation on the timing for death. For example, 3 minutes without air, you're dead, right? And 3 hours without warmth, you'll die from hypothermia. 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. So I extrapolate that. So level 1 preparedness means you should have at least 3 days worth of food. That's it. So that's your bug out bag, right? 3 days of food, water, medical supplies, equipment, clothing, copies of all your ID, and password codes and credit cards and spare cash. Yeah. So that, you can take that bag, just like in Fort McMurray. And I was up in Fort McMurray just about 2 months before the fires occurred. And where I was staying with friends up there. Everything burned down. All of it is gone, And they had to get out of there fast. So, yes, if you have to get out fast, grab your bug out bag. And again, it should have the essentials, all your photocopies of all your ID, your passports, and your credit cards, and your driver's license, and all that should all be in that bug out bag. So that if you grab it, you can rent a hotel room. You can
firearms, paperwork.
Yeah. Firearms, paperwork, absolutely. Your FAC, FAC, right? Your PAL.
Yeah, PAL. Possession Acquisition License.
Yeah, your PAL. So put all that in your bug out bag. But that's the minimum that you should do, of course. Level 2 then would be 3 weeks, and that means that you've got enough food and water in your kitchen or in your pantry or in your basement for 3 weeks. And that will help to get you through the ice storm, right?
That's right.
I've told people, like, it's really simple for disaster to occur, power outage, because once the power is out, and I've been through a couple of blackouts here, the grocery stores are closed because they can't process payments anyways, right? They're not taking cash. The cash machine doesn't work. Yeah, they'll run on a diesel engine power, but you know how many times these diesel generators fail? They don't maintain them. They run out of gas in 2 days, and then you're done. And so all the grocery stores will be closed. You can't buy anything anywhere. You can't go to the bank. You can't go to the ATM. So if you're without power for a week, you're not going to have food for a week. So you better have at least a week, but preferably 3 weeks because, you know, a power outage can last, what was it, Hurricane Katrina there? People were still without power 2 months later, you know. So level 2, have at least 3 weeks worth of food, and then level 3 would be 3 months. And
you'd be surprised how much food and especially water a person needs for 3 weeks. If you figure out how much they need on a daily basis, times by the amount of people, times by 3 weeks, it's not undoable, but it's more than most people think about. And that means that if it happened, most people would run out of water before they help arrive, before they could as well. And that's something that's just something that's easy to start with, and here, grab something here and there, a bag of rice and water, and start building up your stores. It's just peace of mind. It's being able to take care of yourself. I've been to Brussels.
Number one priority is food and water. Number one, because also even in the scenario of the the Bolsheviks, what they have done and what a lot of people tyrannies have done is they cut off the food supply, and it's so easy to do. All they would have to do is stop the trucks from delivering to the grocery stores. You know, a couple of choke points in a city, and the whole city's
on the bridges
down. And
Vancouver.
Give it a week, and everybody's eating their pets. You know.
Someone in the chat, Roscoe Truman, and we just want to make sure we acknowledge everyone in the chat. He says, well, we dodged a big bullet. And I think he's talking about this Bolshevik socialist revolution you're referring to. When Hillary didn't win the presidency, and now it looks like she's finally going to go down for her crimes. Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah.
We have Jason in the chat. He's from Burned Ass Ranch, and they live off-grid. And I just had the pleasure of meeting him a day or two ago, and he's been living off-grid. I'm more or less going without 100% knowledge here, but for about 5 years, and documenting it on the internet for the last year or so. And he does some really silly, some really smart, some really fun stuff that shows what it's like to actually be living off-grid. What do you guys think about off-grid living? You're both right smack dab in the middle of Metropolis Central. What does that resonate with you guys?
Russell?
Off the grid is not an option. Like I said, we've talked about the lone wolf situation. I think I'm going to do better in a community. So, and go where?
Well, you've been from Alberta. You know where we are. You're always just a drive away, right?
Well, it's only 1,000 miles when the shit. Because all the gas stations are going to have all sorts of fuel. The highways aren't going to be busy. Yeah, I'm not going to be like the Von Trapp family and fucking hike over the fucking Rocky Mountains either. So, although I do have food rations set aside here. These are emergency food ration packs. These are really good.
That's very smart.
Soldiers also have the IMPs, the individual meal packages. They're really good. They're all dehydrated. We've kind of alluded to it a few times. Weapons. Is it imperative, whether it's a gun or a stash of knives or whatever it is, nunchucks, do you need weapons to protect yourself when the shit hits the fan?
Absolutely. Yeah. I recommend everybody. I got a video out why every warrior should own a firearm. And it addresses democide, right? You should have a gun to prevent democide. Yes, democide. Democide is a term that describes death by your own government. It means your own government has killed you. And in the last 100 years, democide for the world, the number of deaths range into somewhere between 249, 272 million people killed by their own governments. And that's called democide. And for example, you know, the communist Russians killed 40 million, like you said, 54 million. The numbers keep changing. Communist China killed upwards of 60 million of their own people, you know. Guatemala killed their own people. Indonesia killed their own people. Cambodia killed their own people. In the millions, tens of millions of people. And before they did all that, all those countries instituted gun bans. So to me, you know, I bring this back to the laws of nature, what I call threat display behavior, that if you look tough and mean, people tend to leave you alone. So I think you should have a gun, because if you have a gun, you look like somebody not to be messed with. You don't need to use the gun. You don't need to shoot people. Just having it is a deterrent to people messing with you. And an armed civilian population is a deterrent to tyrannies rounding you up at 3 o'clock in the morning, driving you to a forest, and shooting you in the back of the head in front of an open pit, which has happened 240 million times in the last century. So I think everybody should own a gun, any kind of gun. I don't care what it is, single shot, bolt action 22, you hang it above the fireplace, you never use the damn thing. It doesn't matter. You should have a firearm because the government knows that it's out there. And they know that there's, 30, 40, 50 million firearms in the country. It will prevent them from turning into full-blown shoot people in the head in the street tyranny. It doesn't mean the government isn't still going to screw with you like they did. They screw with us. Canada, I mean, oh my God, our government. People think we are ruled. We're such a nice country, and there's no such thing as corruption in Canada. We're also, oh my God, we're idiots. We're the biggest tax slaves on the planet here in Canada, and yet no Canadians talking about revolution or fighting back or anything like that, because it's never going to happen. Canadians are so complacent, but when they come into your house, when they come to your farm house, and they drag your daughter out into the field and they start stripping her down, you will use your gun then, right? And that's the deterrent. That's why they're not doing that. Because tyrannies always go there. Every government ends up as a tyranny. It's inevitable. History shows it time and time again. Governments don't become more free with time. Governments become less free with time. We had our freedom in the 1800s, early 1900s, but it's clamping down, and it's never going to get better. It's not going to change. So the governments will become more tyrannical, and so they will, institute all these taxes and legislation and bylaws, and how many laws are on the book? Who could possibly abide by all the regulations? I mean, it's insane. We're already slaves. There's no doubt about it. But they still haven't rounded us up yet and shot us in the back of the head. This is a curiosity for me, because the degree of communist infiltration in a society that has reached the degree it has reached here in Canada, we should already be up in the gulags, just like Solzhenitsyn. That it hasn't happened yet here or in the United States, I attribute to the fact that we're still allowed to own guns. So for that reason alone, everybody should get a gun, just as an intimidation factor, because you know what? When they come for your wife, when they come for your children, and you're going to die anyways, you're going to say to yourself, well, at least I'll take a couple of the bastards with me. I'm going to go get that 22 above the fireplace. And that's the only thing that, in my mind, that has prevented total tyranny up to this point. Now, as a survival tool, yes, you need a gun. You need a gun. We always have this impression that during a complete breakdown of society that everybody's going to raid everybody else for their stuff. I'm not sure that will happen. It will happen in certain areas. It will happen here in Toronto. There's a few neighborhoods that forget about it. They're going to burn each other alive, right? But where you are, Clayton, it might not happen. I really don't think your neighbors are going to turn on you. And again, I looked at history, and we look back at World War II, where Europe was in flames. They were being bombed. They were invaded. They were occupied. They had food shortages. They had blackouts. There was no law and order, and there were guns everywhere. And how many stories do you have of gangs of Dutch people running around robbing and shooting each other? None. I've never heard
where I am, you're right. Where I am here, you're right. It'll be Jason from Burned Ass Ranch, he commented, it'd be more about people that can continue to trade and help each other after the current framework fails. And a big part of it is the lifestyle in between then. Before, like, you don't go right from having problems to needing a gun. I carry a knife on me at all times and a really powerful flashlight on me at all times, and pepper spray and a tactical knife. And they're just things that I can use that have helped me, that could help me in situations and help me with everyday life as it is, seeing and illuminating and checking the vehicle and transitional spaces, and the knife for everything from work to needing to open something, to the point where if it was a like you guys talked about in one of your previous shows, an active shooter situation where they came in, I'm not allowed to carry a gun, a concealed weapon, or I would proudly and carefully and with respect and do the rules, because I have done all the paperwork and the criminal background checks daily and everything, all the red tape steps it takes to be trusted with a firearm in Canada. I would carry it, but because I can't, I do have a knife, and you're never going to use it unless it's for everyday things. But if it ever came down to a point where you needed it, you want something. It's just a tool to help you in the meantime. Yeah. You carry a jack in your car. You carry a first aid kit. I'm trained in first aid, and it's a big thing to me. I have a really good first aid kit with me at all times, and I know where that is. There's all kinds of things in between that you can do to help you with doing that. You're talking about off-grid and the living of that. What do you, one of the last shows we did a rehearsal with Captain Kirk Mignonia from Star Trek Continues, and we talked about just political correctness now in schools. And what do you think that has to play in all this and where it's taken society maybe?
Well, again, that's why I say that the greatest threat to our survivability, our lives, our livelihoods, our society is communism, socialism, because all that political correctness, it's straight out of the Frankfurt School. It's straight out of the Marxist guidebooks on how to destroy a society so that you could subvert it and take it over. Who was that Russian defector they interviewed in the 80s? Do you remember, Russell?
No.
Sokhanov or something like that. He was brilliant. He was a KGB defected to U.S. back in the 50s. They interviewed him in the 1980s, and he laid it out step by step. Everything we see now, he said that's what they will do, and it's called it's a process of demoralizing a society so that they no longer have anything to fight for or stand up for, and they can just be completely taken over. So all this political correctness and the feminism and all the
and it wasn't Sakharov. No, that's way before, right?
Huh?
Never mind.
No, I think you might be right.
I said Sakharov.
Yeah,
yeah.
It's a very famous. It's all over. Yeah, but he lays it out step by step. This is communism. That's what all this stuff is. And so that's why I say I'm, to me, that's the biggest threat. I'm not worried about, mass coronal ejection or meteor impact or anything like that. That's not what I'm worried about. Our greatest threat is our own government. And it has always been throughout the history of humankind. It's always been your own government. So if they're going to institute a martial law and start rounding people up, then I'd still rather be in your position, Clayton. But I have strategies in my situation too, because you can go underground and hide in a crowd. You can't hide out there. That's the only difference. But for me to be able to go underground and hide, you got to be you have to know spycraft and all that.
Are you talking about being gray man?
Yeah, you have to become the gray man, but not necessarily the gray man. Sometimes, look, I'll confess, I have some disguises. And I don't mean that I changed my appearance. I mean, I changed my clothes. So I have a bright red jacket full of patches and a construction helmet and a light and an armband and a tool belt, right? So I could look like emergency rescue, that will get me through checkpoints. And then because I know the lingo and I can pull it off, so I have a couple of disguises. One is security. I've got my security hat, I got my security jacket, I got a tactical vest. I could take my shotgun and sling it over my shoulder, and so long as I'm wearing security all over my body, I could probably go anywhere in the city. And if anybody, gave me a hard time because of my age and the way I'm able to pull it off, I could, tell them to go fuck themselves, go contact your superior. You're not in the pay grade to know who I really am, that kind of stuff, right? Like you can just brazen it out. You've read these kind of stories all throughout history, and you can pull it off because people are, they are so conditioned to obey authority. So all you have to do is put on some of these symbols of authority, and they're already preconditioned to obey you. I think what was the guy there in California? He did that experiment. Well, and because it was funny, he did that experiment after I was giving this lecture about using disguise. And I said, if I put on this red coat, put on the the yellow safety helmet with the, and then reflective gear. I said, you could watch. I will step out into the street and I could wave down the traffic and stop every car that comes down the street. They will stop because they see, I might be construction worker, I might be a spot check, I might be something, but they will stop because I'm wearing some uniform of authority. So they said, well, you don't have a car. Yeah, I don't have a car right now. But I don't care. I can get a car really easy. I put on the goddamn hot hat and the stupid jacket, and I walk out in the street, and the first, nice looking truck that comes by, I'm going to wave them down. Then I'm going to pull my shotgun, tell them to get the hell out. I got a truck now, So that's what I mean about, for me to survive in this situation in the urban jungle, you got to be kind of shrewd. So I've got different disguises. I've got geared so I could look like, I have a crest that I made up. It's completely fabricated. It's fictional, called Ventura Volunteer Search and Rescue, right? There is no such thing, but volunteer search and rescue. So now if I have to get out of the city and they've blocked it off, I'm saying, no, we're doing a search and rescue mission. I got to go through here and get there, right? So I can carry a bug out bag and all kinds of stuff on me, maybe even weapons, and they'll let it pass if they think I'm part of a search and rescue team, part of, or USAR, Urban Search and Rescue, right? And especially with my age and the way I look, and I can put on the demeanor of some guy in authority, I can bluff or bullshit my way through checkpoints or past, roadblocks to get to where I'm going. I could even probably, I've got another outfit, which is like a more top level security outfit. I put that on. I'm in every locked condominium or behind, the locked doors at the grocery store. All I need to do is carry my, my two-way radio and bluff it. So I'm saying through disguise and subterfuge and trickery, I can probably still get around the city. I could probably get to places that other people couldn't get to. And I could probably get access to food and supplies other people couldn't get to just by being a sneaky bastard. That makes sense.
Sunburned Ass Ranch. By the way, check out the Facebook page, Sunburned Ass Ranch. He's got a lot of interesting comments here in the chat boards.
It's a fun page for sure.
Yeah, he's talking about divide and conquer with political propaganda, and he feels it's to soften people, make them weak.
Oh, yeah.
Take away attention, put attention on something else rather than what the bill they're trying to pass through or this legislation or...
Like even in the prepper community, I mean, everybody's fighting each other over ridiculous stuff. They have us, and again, this is part of the Communist Manifesto. This is part of the Frankfurt School. This is part of their plan to turn everybody against each other, because a house divided cannot stand. What was that, Julius Caesar? And that's what they're doing to us. That's what they've done to us for hundreds of years, though. That's what they always do. The Catholics have to kill the Protestants, and no, the Protestants have to kill the Lutherans, and on and on and on, back and forth. Everybody's murdering each other. The last two wars, world wars, these were cousins killing each other. Nobody was a threat to anybody else at this time. It was just ridiculous. It was all instigated and formulated. They murdered millions and millions of people, burned women and children alive. The horror, by turning us against each other. We've got to stop this, identity stuff. Even, like I said, with the prepper, I was on some community forum, prepper forum. You can disagree with me. I don't care. I'm not the end-all supreme advisor on all things survivability. I have my strategies and tactics that I would use, and you're welcome to learn them or learn from them. And I know guys that, that do the off-grid living stuff, that they're experts in their field. I wouldn't have an opinion on it, 9-volt or 12-volt system. I don't know, I've looked into it. It's a tough life, though, living off grid. It's tough. And I've been to a couple of places, and all this alternate energy stuff really doesn't, the solar power in Canada, forget about it. And wind power, again, not so great. I'd rather have a generator on a fast-moving stream. But even among preppers, they'll say, "Oh, 440 stainless knife is it better than a carbon high?" They'll argue about the minutest details and call each other names. Look, let's all, be on the same side. If you're not a communist, you're okay in my book. That's all I care about. I don't care whether you're, 9mm beats a 40 or. It doesn't matter, all these little details that we have to fight with each other about. The one thing we have to do is prevent the socialists from taking over, because then they'll come for us. That's, to me, the first and primary threat.
A house divided cannot stand is not from Caesar. It's from Mark 3:24. A kingdom divided itself cannot stand, and then famously reused by Lincoln in his house divided speech. Just to keep things on the up and up, my friend.
Well, thank you for that, Russell.
You're a martial artist, so you don't necessarily have to pull a knife or pull a gun. My problem with doing that is you pull the knife and the guy shoves it up your ass. I think it's just always better just to be able to defend yourself, through self-defense strategies. Does everyone need to have this, or should they just have a gun or a knife? I mean, not everyone can defend themselves physically.
Well, everybody should have a gun. Like a knife is not going to do you that much good. Look, I would say yes, absolutely. Everybody should have some hand-to-hand combat training, and keep up on the skills. Like if it's like a weekend self-defense course, fine, that's enough. But do take it every 6 months. Refresh it, because you won't remember it.
There's going to be a lot of people watching that haven't heard of you before and haven't seen you before. We're kind of downplaying your expertise in this whole field and your past. Tell us a little bit about the credentials and where you came from, and some of the things that have given you insight into these things, and what you've traveled through, and how you've learned to be in a situation here talking with us as an expert in this field, because truly you are.
You mean in the martial arts field or the survival?
Yeah, in the martial arts. And all the above. Okay,
well, I'll be honest with you. I grew up at Black Creek Pioneer Village. We were taken there in my grade school, grade 1 through 6, every couple of weeks to Pioneer Village, where we learned how to milk a cow, how to forge nails, and we went to the blacksmith shop, and then they would teach you how to do it. We all made one of those horseshoe nails, right? And we got to keep it at the end. You hammered it on the anvil, and you put it in the furnace with the bellows. And we learned how to make candles. We learned how to spin wool into yarn, and then weave that yarn into in a loom. So from the age of like 6, I already had this sort of pioneer mentality. I wanted to be Daniel Boone when I grow up. And so then I entered, so I was the first to enter a new program, which was an Outward Bound program. It was like a 3-year program. And they took us 3 times a year up north. And they taught us everything: how to canoe, how to build fires, how to bake a pie in an underground fire pit, how to rappel off of cliffs, how to shoot a .22 caliber rifle, how to shoot a bow and arrow, how to repair a canoe. I mean, it was an amazing program. So I really got into wilderness survival. I just loved being outdoors. And I did my first solo canoe trip at the age of 15, by myself into Algonquin Park. Algonquin Park, of course. It's my favorite, one of my favorites, It was there, by the way, that during my solo canoe trip that I heard about Tom Thompson and started to watch his paintings. And it was him that inspired my artistic career, which is also a whole different world. But
I met Robert Bateman up there one day.
No kidding. He's wonderful. I love Robert.
Sold him an air cleaner. Actually, my roommate was the one that sold him the air cleaner.
No kidding. Yeah, no, he's a great artist. Awesome. So I have a great love for Canadian artists. Well, they're the ones from the 1920s. Contemporary art, well. Anyway, so then couple of years later, I got a job teaching for the Toronto Boys Home. I was out, at that time they called it an out tripper. I would take, Toronto Boys Home was a halfway house for teenagers that had been in trouble with the police, and they were now being let out from juvie into the public, but they would stay a couple of months in a halfway house. And they ran this camp up in Algonquin Park all summer long. And so my job was to take 8 of the troubled teenagers and one of their cabin counselor on a week-long trip up and through Algonquin Park and teach them how to canoe, fish, and swim, and set up tents and stuff like that. It was the greatest summer of my life, you know. And I saw what being out in the woods can do for young men, you know, because these were like inner city guys that, you know, got busted for shoplifting and drug dealing and fights and stuff like that, and a few suicide attempts and things like that. You know, they were screwed up teenage boys coming from a bad background, right? And you put them for a week up in the woods where, you know, everything depended on them doing for themselves, you know, cooking and setting up the tents and building the fires and carrying the canoes and all. And they come out of that, they are changed men. They, you know, the confidence, they're way more relaxed. So anyways, don't get me started on outward bound programs. I think it should be mandatory, you know, just get out in the woods and really live life on the edge for a couple of days, you know. So I did that, and then after that I joined St. John Ambulance. Wonderful woman hired me, Pat Robinson, and so I became an instructor for them, and then I became an instructor at the same time for Red Cross, and I taught at the police college here in Brampton and the fire department. So, and
No, keep going. Just the quintessential sound of a beer can opening. Anyway, keep going, Stefan.
What are you guys doing over there? I did not hear any beer can opening.
Clayton's misbehaving. It's okay.
So I did that for a number of years. I got some awards and stuff for participating in mock disaster drills, you know, where, well, you've seen them on TV. They do it every year. What if a bomb went off in Brampton and we had, you know, 60 casualties? And so I won awards for that. And then after that, but the whole time I'm also taking martial arts. But then I went to China. I'd spent a lot of time going from club to club. I studied this style, then that style. I spent like 2 years in all these different styles: taekwondo, karate, judo. Then I took kung fu from this downtown Chinatown school here. And after 3 years of that, I said, I want to go to China and learn. You know, I really want to learn from the original source. And so I spent 4 years living in Hong Kong, Taipei, and then traveling through mainland China, Thailand, and learning martial arts there. And I've been teaching it ever since, so 35 years.
And you've written 7 books on various subjects. So, yeah, very interesting guy. Chinastrategies.com. Just a few more questions before I let you go. Listen, I went hiking today with my girlfriend.
Yeah.
We went on this 4-hour, 15-kilometer hike or something. And there were spots where, you know, I was aware that there could be a bear anywhere at any time. It's an old question. What do you do if you see a bear? Do you play dead?
Depends on the type of bear and what time of the day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Good answer.
Yeah. A grizzly?
So
yeah.
I see a grizzly bear or I see a black bear. Give me either one.
Okay, grizzly bear, play dead. But I wouldn't drop to the ground, play dead. What I would do is freeze and slowly back up, very slowly back up. I ran into a grizzly when I was hiking up. You know, Mount Aberdeen there, that's the one behind Lake Louise. You must know that, Clayton, right?
He knows it. He's just pretending he doesn't. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, you know Lake Louise. It's right up there by Edmonton. Just north.
Been there many times. I did mountain rescue there, yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful there, right? So the mountain that's behind the picture that you always see of Lake Louise, that's Mount Aberdeen. And so I hiked up through there and over that mountain and in around the lake. And yeah, I saw a grizzly up there, you know. But he was pretty far away, so I wasn't too worried. But still, I don't like to see them out there, especially when you're going.
I've had the unfortunate pleasure of running into them many times. Grizzly bears and black bears working on the railroad as a locomotive engineer. They come to the tracks to eat the grain. So you're out in the middle of nowhere, and something happens to the train. You're stopped, and you're walking back on there. It's you and them all the time. Again, you carry bear spray. You try to take some of the precautions you can, but be smart and make noise. And it's part of life.
Yeah, with the grizzly, because you're threatening their territory, they will come after you if you appear to be a threat. So with the grizzly, you want to appear less of a threat. With a black bear, though, they might be looking at you as food. So you want to do threat display behavior, as I mentioned before. And so with a black bear, you want to make a lot of noise and act as though you're threatening. And I've run into a couple of black bears and late at night, right? And they're trying to get at my... When I was really young, when I was 15, I didn't hang the food bag far enough away. I hung it like 20 feet away from the tent. Too close, right?
It's just like you say in A Master's Guide, your book, A Master's Guide to the Way of the Warrior. It's about showing and just knowing that no animal, human or predator or animal that wants to be hurt. We all have that survival instinct and to protect ourselves. So when you see a real threat, somebody that's willing to go there or is prepared to there or is got nothing to lose or is injured or is scared or put in a corner, you know.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So that is, black bear tried to make his money, but not with a grizzly. And I ran into a California brown bear once too, when I was hiking up there in that famous park there with the big waterfall. Yeah, brown bear. We were really stupid there too. We were sleeping under the stars in our sleeping bags, right? We had the food in our backpacks, and we were using our backpacks for pillows. For some reason, again, I was really young. I didn't think there were bears in California. We thought, we got them up in Canada, but we're too far south for bears. Well, 3 o'clock in the morning, suddenly my head bonk hits the ground. What the hell wakes me up? Where's my backpack? So that bear had come up to within inches of my face to steal the backpack with the food in it. So that was really stupid of me. So the next morning, we woke up and, of course, our backpacks are torn and contents are scattered over 2 acres, and there's the goddamn bear. So we're thinking, okay, we're going to make threatening noises, right? Scare him off and try and get our stuff back. So here we go, acting big. You make yourself big. You wave your arms. You yell, "Hey bear, here bear!" Blah, blah. Turns out she had 2 cubs with her, so that was a wrong thing to do. We didn't see the cubs at first, so we're making all this threatening display behavior, and then she looking at us, and they start to make this noise, and she starts walking towards us, and I'm going, uh-oh. And as we walked towards it, then we could see there were 2 cubs behind her, and we got, oh fuck. So we backed off. We hiked about half a mile away and just waited for her to leave to get our stuff. Well, yeah, lots of bear stories. Sorry about that.
Another myth I want to talk about, or maybe something that people won't know, is let's say you get stabbed by a knife. Do you pull the knife out? Or maybe it's a stick or anything like that. Do you pull it out and wrap the wound, or do you keep it in?
You keep it in. Yeah, it's with embedded objects. First aid training recommends that you apply a donut bandage and stabilize the embedded object. The theory is that if you pull it out, it may be acting as a plug, like if it penetrated a major artery, for example, and let's say it's femoral artery. So you're walking, you fell down, a stick goes through your leg, right? Should you pull that stick out? Well, if it hit your femoral artery and you pull that stick out and it was acting as a plug, you will bleed to death in 3 minutes, because there's no way for you to stop the bleeding of a punctured femoral artery. It's just too deep. You'd have to apply a tourniquet, of course. That'd be the only thing you could do.
Which themselves are dangerous, in truth.
Which themselves is, it's a last resort.
If you're up in the mountains, if you're far away from help, that kind of thing, out at a gun range, you need the time.
Yeah.
And still, you have to cycle it. You have
to cycle it. Exactly.
That's right.
You have to loosen the tourniquet up every 15 minutes. and allow it to bleed out so that you can get, you know.
Speaking of being shot, I was shot. My friends know this. I was shot in the face by another friend with a pellet gun when I was a kid, and the pellet went up in my face, and they left it in there. It's actually still in there. When I go to the doctors or the dentist and take an X-ray, they see it in there.
What? But you should be getting lead poisoning.
You'd think so. Maybe that's my problem.
Maybe if your body probably formed a cyst around it, which is sort of like this callus kind of scar tissue around it might contain it.
My superpower.
Yeah, so don't remove the knife or the embedded object. Like if you're in an explosion or something like that, and some shrapnel, or it could be metal or wood or whatever, and you're embedded. However, that's assuming that you can get to an emergency room within 12 hours. If you can't, there's no medical help around at all ever, then you're going to have to take the risk of removing it, because you're going to need it to heal, and also you're going to have to deal with the infection. You're most likely to die from sepsis than from anything else with an embedded object wound. That's why they usually give you a tetanus shot when you step on a rusty nail bullshit. It's not that it's a rusty nail, but it's something that embeds bacteria deep into your body. And if it festers and it gets infected, that's really bad. And you'll die in a few days. So that's why they give you a tetanus shot. But even still, so with an embedded object, and you're weeks away from medical help, you're going to have to deal with the infection. But you probably won't have the equipment to deal with it, so you're going to die anyways.
Maybe you should just cut the leg off and hope for the best. Cauterize the end, right? Like,
well, I wouldn't be amputating anything until you saw the gangrene really had set in, and you'll know when the gangrene sets in because it's the worst smell in the world. Yeah. So body smell,
Orientation. We've all probably heard this one. The moss only grows on the north side of the tree. But I've seen trees, a lot of them, that have moss all the way around. So that must be another one of those bullshit.
Yeah.
Myths.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's it. I think it applies in certain situations in certain parts of the world. Like it might apply in Oregon, but not in Wisconsin. But no, I've never. I tried that. I know I tried that too when I was walking through the woods. Okay, so where's north? Well, moss all over the place. A little bit more moss on this side, but the other trees got more moss on the other side. No, forget about it. You're not going to tell direction from moss.
I think you'd rather use the sun, right?
Yeah, I think the sun would be easier. God forbid you should actually have a little compass. So all my bug out bags have compasses. I used to teach an orienteering course, speaking in my background, at Albion Hills Conservation Area, which is up north here. And so, yeah, a compass. Any last questions from the chat room?
No one's chatting in the chat room. They've all left. But another couple ones. Stocking up on matches. You always hear that one. You got to have these strike anywhere matches. And I'm thinking lighters work really well.
Yeah. Personally, I have a whole bunch of lighters, and I'll use those first. But I do have a bunch of matches, too. Just in case the lighters run out. Huh?
I'm all about the lighter.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. A good Zippo will always work as long as you got fuel, and replaceable flints.
Nah, nothing's better than a Bic, baby.
Just put half a dozen in your bug out bag. That's what I do,
Well, sir, thank you so much for joining the show. Tell me about this new book you're writing. Is it different than anything else you've written, and why did you decide to write it?
Which new book?
You said earlier in the program that you're writing a new book.
Oh, yeah. The
guy's written so many books, he doesn't even fucking know what book I'm referring to.
No, because I'll be honest with you, I got like 4 books on the computer. They're all about 90% done. I got to go through and do all the editing and the rewrites, which is really tedious. I haven't gotten around to it. And and a couple of them I still don't have the voice. But what I was working on is tentatively called the Urban Survival Plan. And it's a way of teaching people how to build communities, because we don't know how to do this. It's not something you're taught in high school, 12 years in school, and we don't know how to create a community. And I think that for whatever future situation is coming down the line, our greatest survival strategy is to build small autonomous communities, whether it's something as simple as a prepper support group or something like that, or a buying group where you pool your money, you get a wholesale license, and you buy wholesale instead of retail. You save a lot of money on groceries. And even things like fuel or building materials. I mean, like only going and pay retail. You should be paying wholesale, right? So buying groups will afford you to do that, but also mutual aid societies where you can, if it's a financial crisis that we're facing, then people that can support each other by kicking in a couple of bucks into a pot and using that pot to buy emergency supplies for the people that most need it, things like that. That's how our ancestors survived, through mutual aid societies and fraternal organizations that helped each other out during a crisis. And I think as we go deeper and deeper into financial and economic and political crisis, you still have a better chance having people on the same side that support each other. And what Clayton is doing there in his location.
Yeah, I think communal living is the way to go. You got to get along with people. It's like The Walking Dead. It's the Saviors, and you've got Rick's group. You have to have a group of people all working together.
Yeah.
That's the only way.
The book has already got like sample charters and rules and application forms and questionnaires and how to filter people that come into your group and what agreements you should sign, what legal entity you should have now before the shit hits the fan, because there's a lot of benefits to having a nonprofit organization, things like that. So do you want to incorporate? Do you want to become a nonprofit? Do you want to be a for-profit? Membership dues, obligations, contracts, a charter of rights, all those will be samples of it in the book, so that you can pick and choose, what kind of format, what kind of organization. But you do need those tools. You can't all just say, oh, well, we'll all just, well, who's going to, clean the latrines, and who's going to do guard duty at 3 a.m. And, like all these things will come out that people don't plan in advance, that are going to cause a lot of strife. So this helps to set some ground rules for whoever joins the community, what's expected of them and what they can expect in return.
Stefan, I know you're not big on social media, but for those in the audience that want to be able to reach out to you, ask you questions, maybe order a book, what's the best way to communicate?
I'm on Facebook, Stefan Verstappen, and you can see all my posts and stuff. And to find out everything about my books, just go to chinastrategies.com. I know it's a weird... I'm not very good at marketing. Nobody can remember my name and nobody can remember my website. But like it should be survivorprep1.com or something like that. But no, I wanted to change my name to Rex Steele. But no, I'm
Rex Steele.
Speaking of this porn name, look at this look of yours now. I love it. What did you say? It was like a bad season.
Inspired by your graphic that you put together, right?
Oh, you like that? Thank you so much. Yeah, that's done by Pirelli.
Makes me look really, really butch.
Yeah, that's what all the gay lingo. Yeah, I understand. No, you're all shaved and nice looking. Yeah, now you're all hairy, grizzly Adams. Well, we've appreciated you being on the show, Mr. Adams, and it was very good
talking with you and Clayton again. Russell, always a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks again to the audience. Chinastrategies.com. Stefan Verstappen on YouTube. Clayton, any last words?
Yeah, check out his last book. The one I just ordered is a master's guide to the way of the warrior, and it's
thank you, Clayton. Thank you for ordering that.
No problem.
Hope you do. Write me if you have any questions. I always write back to whoever writes me.
Yeah, well, Stefan's been a good friend of the show for a while now, so I'd love to see the audience support him, and we certainly do. Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks you so much, man. Thanks
everybody for joining us. Thanks for the chat.
Thanks, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Subscribe.
Take care.
Good night.
Good night, guys.